Hi, it's Linda Kahn here. Happy to share my next inspiring wisdom warrior woman, Holman. Cas's motto is, if we can play together, we can live together. Through her company, Heroes Will Rise, she is doing her utmost to change the nature of how we encourage children and adults to play creatively. This information and all quotes come from another excellent Netflix series called Abstract, The Art of Design. This is season 2, this episode is called Cas Holman, Design for Play. My aim for this Wisdom Warrior Women series is to showcase women who embody the fullness of both their feminine and masculine energies. They seem to have a natural ability to move back and forth between these, and that balance helps them fully express themselves. So why did I choose Cas Holman? Because men and women alike are starved for play. We all have play wounds, where play is seen as something frivolous, it's non-essential, something kids do and are supposed to grow out of. But as Cas states, play is as essential as food, air, sleep, whatever else we have to do to stay alive. Play is therapy that engages our brain and gets our body and our mind back in tune with each other. Unquote. And the problem with a lot of what is called play, both for kids and adults, is that it is very goal-driven. It's yet another thing we try and produce or recreate. We're going to do a picture of that thing, or there's some winning involved, a result that we're after. Cas states, if I already give kids a set of parts and tell them to build a car, there will be a right and a wrong answer. They already have an understanding and an archetype of what a car is. It's a finished idea. On the other hand, if I give them the parts and pieces and say, build a way to get to school, well, then there's room for many ideas, and they can make a sidewalk or a rocket launcher or bird saddles. I love that idea, bird saddles. Continuing, she says, my work as a designer is to give them these tools so that they are free to imagine, explore ideas, and invent new things. I say that I design for play. We don't design the play, we design for the circumstances of play to arise. Now, play is really part of our feminine energies. It's that open, expansive, non-boundaried space of exploring without a goal, of being curious, of asking, what if? It helps us be in the moment, to feel delight and ease in new discoveries. And as with many things having to do with our feminine energies, this notion of play for play's sake alone got put on the list of unimportant things to do with your time. And as I was listening to this show again, I watched it actually quite a while ago, and thinking about all this, it hit me that this topic of children's toys and play is what opened the doors for me into feminism and the women's movement 50 years ago, this coming fall. Now that was kind of a hit me over the head shock, but it was the fall of 1973. I had just started social work graduate school and had to write a paper for class. Looking back on it, it always seemed like a meeting with destiny in my choice of topics. I was curious to know if a 3 to 5-year-old boy or girl, so they're in preschool, right? At that age, do they have a sense of themselves as a boy or a girl? And if so, where did that come from? Is it something that is just natural? I mean, there's the obvious anatomical difference that kids explore, but I'm a boy, I'm a girl. Where does that come from? And or was this instilled by parents, by teachers, by other adults? So I dove into this topic. I just rather innocently started researching, looking into all this stuff, and I was deeply, deeply stunned and shocked to realize the depth of how much we are all channeled from pre-birth into these often rigid roles and rules of what a girl and a boy are allowed and expected to do. How constrained and judged and shaped we are into creatures that may or may not have much of anything to do with our own natural inclinations. And I would dare to say that if anything, it's gotten worse over the 50 years since I first opened my eyes to all that, rather than better. And you might ask, well, how can you possibly say that when we have put so much focus on expanding opportunities for girls to choose whatever path they want? And I say that because, to my mind, we are not in the business of creating whole human beings. When have you ever heard a boy say with pride, I can do anything a girl can do? Never. I mean, think about it. He'd be laughed at, humiliated, bullied, made fun of. And yet we applaud when we hear a little girl say, I can do anything a boy can do. Stop and think about that a minute. The model we are still using is the belief that the male qualities, such as being independent, goal-oriented, focused, directed, disciplined, organized, certain, analytical, they are more highly developed, more valued, more sought after than feminine qualities like collaboration, gentleness, being emotional, creative, nurturing, receiving, vulnerable, sensitive, cooperative. That male is still the standard by which everything else is judged. So along comes a woman like Cas Holman, and I am in awe. Her ultimate aim is to help create and shape what I call whole human beings, to explore the edges of who we are without those gendered roles. And she does this by giving children the opportunity to join in non-structured free play with objects, toys, if you will, that unlock their imagination and creativity. It develops cooperation, confidence, problem-solving skills, the full range of what it is to be human and live together. So in this particular little video, I just want to talk about a couple of her key projects, and you can look up more about her if you get inspired. Early on in her design career, Cas was part of the Rockwell Group's team, where they created the big blue blocks. She says, they're just giant, and we designed a way for children to build and create a playground that would change and evolve throughout the day. So the big blue blocks came out of the impetus to provide an ever-evolving playground that's designed by children. And By now, perhaps the thing Cas Holman is most known for is what she calls rigamajig. She describes it as a kit of parts that could be seen as a learning material, a toy or playground. I think of it as a glorified pile of construction debris. It has planks, nuts and bolts, corner brackets, hooks, and there's a pulley. I wanted children to be able to build without mastering a tool. I wanted it to be intuitive and usable for their small hands. I took the wings off the wing nut and put it on the bolt, so the bolt and the nut can easily be screwed in and actually get pretty tight without using any kind of tool. And those are intentionally black. They are meant to look like real hardware. The boards are 3/4-inch plywood. They are heavy planks. It's a very large, heavy piece of wood. Often children, when they first encounter rigamajig, say, "This is real." And they play with it differently. They know that they can impact space and that they can make something larger than themselves and that they're trusted with real materials. This is hugely empowering for them, unquote. Now, due to its size and scope, the original rigamajig is mainly used in classrooms or playgrounds or like a children's museum where lots of kids are working together. Now there's a junior version for home use. Cas explains more about it. There's a lot of collaborative opportunities with materials that big. It's designed in such a way that children need each other. You have to get somebody to hold this while you're screwing in the bracket over there. They don't know what's going to come of it because then hopefully at its best case, it is open-ended. Nobody knows what the children are going to build. Nobody knows what kind of interpersonal dynamics are going to come out. Nobody knows where it might go. First of all, the children, I don't think, experience that as vulnerability. For the kids, it's just all play. It is all unfolding. My biggest challenges, Cas continues, are other people's perceived rules, overarching perception of risk, and what is an acceptable level of risk for children in play. It's hard to remember that those are not real. Children can have a big, heavy board and not get hurt. Unquote. This is a far, far cry from what we see in toy stores. Now, I say more so now, having lived overseas a long time and watching this come in over time. But unfortunately, that American model is exported all over the world. The gendered world of pink and blue toys makes my heart hurt whenever I'm shopping for my little grandson. Now, this isn't to say there aren't differences between girls and boys that seem to come naturally. I mean, how is it that 3-year-old Mateo, he knew the words for car and truck almost before mommy and daddy? He can explain what an excavator is and why it's not the same as a digger. And yet his parents are really doing a good job too of teaching him about his feelings and how to talk about them. And yet there is still this tremendous pressure to fall in line with gendered ideas of boyness and girlness. We are not brought up to see that the full range of qualities that each of those male-female sides of us, that they each bring to us as our full birthright of humanness. A girl is allowed to be a so-called tomboy until she's in her preteen years. And then she's supposed to toe the line and stop all that childish nonsense. Even so, she's now encouraged to explore different fields of study or careers that were viewed as more male just a few years ago. So it seems like progress is being made. But think about this. A boy is far, far less allowed to take on overt feminine qualities along the way. Many feminine careers like interior designer, hairdressers, ballet dancers, and so on, these are stereotyped as gay men's professions. Why? I mean, maybe it seems ironic that I keep separating these masculine and feminine energies and wanting to talk about them so that we grasp what they are, when ultimately my aim is to have us understand that we really are both. But the more we can access this full spectrum of ourselves, the less we reject parts of us and then project those out, those shadow sides that we don't like, that we're afraid of. We project those onto those other people out there. And yet there's still so much distortion of what these energies are even all about. Stereotypes abound. A friend of mine was visiting recently, and she surprised me. She said, I was really surprised when a colleague told me that she sees me as being quite feminine. And I myself thought, oh, yeah, because this friend is highly ambitious and very direct. I'd say she has lots of the high masculine traits. And she said, well, to me, somebody who's feminine is somebody who is a woman who needs to wear a lot of makeup or dress to attract male attention. She's rather passive. So to her, those are feminine qualities. She did not see her equally strong qualities of connecting people together, of clearly and openly appreciating her students. She's a college professor, of giving feedback to her students in this very direct way that's appreciating and saying what they're doing well. And her colleagues as well. These are feminine traits. She didn't even understand that connection. So when we can truly flow back and forth between these and understand how they dance together inside of us, that's when we come into a space of wholeness and truly welcoming in all the parts of ourselves. We're not one or the other, but very much both. Now, Cas Holman was a tomboy who never did grow out of it. She grew up in Grass Valley, California, near the Yuba River. She spent hours and hours playing on her own outside, poking around in nature with no agenda in mind. Being an outsider can be challenging indeed when you're growing up, but it is often the outsiders who see beyond the so-called norm. They are the ones who see underneath the way things are, and they question why things are done in a certain way. When Cas was around third grade, she became more aware that she was supposed to stop being a tomboy. Quote, she said, I started noticing in other places where men and women were treated differently, and the expectations were starting to get really inconvenient. It felt like there was a set of rules that if the other girls didn't follow those rules, they wouldn't be expected of me. So I was a little bit mad and disappointed at them for following the rules of wearing a dress and screaming when they saw a worm. I think it's always been a huge presence. It's a lens through which I have no choice but to see the world. And to me, I'm unquote, and I'm happy that she brings that to us. It is my own experience that in standing outside the box of normal, lesbians and gay men can see and question society's rules in ways that help everyone envision a broader picture of what is possible. Not all do, but there's an opening there. Cas did not fit into the school system. She wondered why in the world kids had to sit inside a classroom all day long. She's saying, there's rows of desks, there's an expert at the front. The assumption is we are just an empty sponge, and the teacher is the vessel of knowledge. I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff, and now it's in your brain, and now you know it. We're still using a model that was developed around industrialization. It was developed to make factory workers, unquote. Now, at one point, Cas learned that Rigamajig, her toy product, was being knocked off in China. She says, my first instinct, hearing that Rigamajig was being used in some schools there, I thought, well, that's much better than whatever stereotype I have the Chinese schools I had. And I thought, well, let me see what they've done with it, because I'm sure they've changed it slightly and maybe they even improved it. And this person who was giving her this information just started showing me these images of what they in China call enji play. Kids building elaborate structures and leaping off of barrels. I was speechless. At that point, I had been working for over a decade in playground design and material design. And to some extent, I had kind of stopped trying to do something that ideal. I knew it was possible that children could do all those things. I didn't know it was possible to let them because of rules and liability. The idea that Rigamajig was being knocked off was really disappointing. And Doug, my business manager, was like, we have to stop them. But the person who was making it was different than the person who was buying it. And so we realized, well, we could be chasing patent infringers, or we could try to partner with the schools. So off to China they went. And she says, I learned that in this region, over 120 schools and 14,000 children are using this model. They're outside for 2 hours a day and have this incredible assortment of materials. Building with these giant blocks, leaping off of ladders. They decide what they're playing with. They bring it out, they put it away. The teachers are really brilliant observers. So I shifted from that initial protective shock, and I immediately knew that I needed to be involved in learning from what this Ms. Chang is doing with enji play. Ms. Chang, she's the founder, and she's been developing enji play over the course of 16 years at the time of the show, of course. Ms. Chang is a genius. So Cas has since been working to bring enji play to the US and the rest of the world. She says she's to some extent the design director, and that, quote, the driving ethos is, what were you curious about? That's such a big shift from what did you learn today, right? That there's an outcome, that there's a thing that is to be learned, that we know what can be learned, and therefore you're out to look for it. Unquote. Tova Klein, the director of the Barnard Center for Toddler Development, is a big supporter of Cas Holman. She hopes that if, quote, you show schools that this really, really works, and then you get another school to try it and another school to try that, you can get this kind of contagion effect because you see it in the children. You see their joy. You see them learning. You see them growing. There's something about children that's truly about humanity. And so in closing, Cas's words ring so true. The reason that I design for children, she says, is I'm designing for people. These are the people that are going to make the world suck or not suck, right? Good toys make good people. And I really believe in that, unquote. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Inspiring Wisdom Warrior Women, women who are here to shape a new world where we understand that whole human beings span the spectrum of masculine and feminine behaviors, characteristics, and traits. The more we welcome all the parts of ourselves home to our souls, the more the world will be whole as well. Thank you. I invite you to subscribe to my channel below, leave a comment. I'm working on a new tool to help us play with these different masculine, feminine qualities. Stay tuned. And in the meantime, I have openings for my one-on-one coaching program called Power with Purpose. Contact me with info below to find out more. And you'll also see a couple links and more information about Cas Holman. Thank you so much. Enjoy.